It is my pleasure to introduce to you your speaker of the morning. Ken Ray resides in Chelsea, Michigan. He is in the United Methodist retirement community there. There may be a fancy name for it. I don't know what that is. But I have known him for too long. Ken and I were assigned by Anderson College in those days, now university, to help a church in Palmyra, New York, southeast of Rochester, not only to help them during the summer until their pastor arrived in the fall, but to assist in placing Anderson graduates in business positions in Rochester. And we were able to coordinate and put that together for several students to move to the Rochester area and start their careers after their college education. And we had a relationship where we lived in a camper that was so small you had to step outside to change your mind. It was, literally lived like that for 3 months, sharing an automobile, sharing preaching assignments. I'd preach in the morning, he at night. Next week, he in the morning, I at night. Led Bible studies and things together. Had our first taste of pastoral ministry together in the summer of 1968. And we have remained friends. Well, he's still my friend. I'm not sure how I am to him. No, we've remained friends all those years. Ken recently, just this summer, lost his wife of 54 years. And he and Diane and Susan and I have shared many experiences together, so that loss is something that is a shared existence. He has served as a lieutenant commander in the Chaplain Corps of the United States Navy. He's been a pastor every other part of his life other than that. And as he was serving in the United Methodist Church, he was a church conflict specialist, serving them there for 12 years of that time. He is a man of God. He is a man of deep thought. He is my friend. And my friends, this is my friend, Ken Ray.
Thank you, Jim, and I won't tell any of those stories. I had a secretary when I pastored Alpena First, and she always made arrangements for me to visit people. And she'd give me a schedule. And one time, Steve and Amy Tung were on the schedule for me to visit, among others. And when I saw that, I said to her, "Are they French?" I know. Thank you for shaking your head, Glenna. She said, "I'm a woman of virtue. How would I know?" She was a saved woman. She was close to the Lord, and she'd had a life. She knew what French kissing was. But she was close to the Lord. You know, she had repented of her sins. She was just a marvelous lady. And she was a marvelous lady because she stayed close to God. Sermon this morning reminds you of the fact that as Christian people, we need to stay close to God. Because it is possible to drift away. It is possible to grow cold. Is there a time in your life when you were closer to God than you are now? That's the question. Who moved? Being close to God gives us the ability to live the Christian life. There's no other way to do it. We do not have the strength in and of ourselves to live the Christian life. It's His goodness, not ours. We're just a bunch of sinners. And hopefully sinners saved by grace. So it's his goodness in our lives that makes our lives different. That only comes from staying close to God and not growing cold. One of my assignments in the Navy was 6 months in an Arctic winter. 50 miles from the Soviet Union in northern Norway in the middle of the winter. And growing cold is a dangerous proposition. I was flying with a company of Marines in a double helicopter, and the back was open so that they could load, but it was flying with the back open. And an Akio, which is what we use to pull our tents with, we lived in tents, got loose, and a Marine unbuckled himself to tie down that Akio. Well, the Akio was fine. The Marine fell out the back in flight. We weren't landing, we weren't taking it off. It was in flight. But the snow was so deep that instead of killing him, it did break his legs. But the snow was so deep that it broke his fall. Dangerous place. We had another Marine who had a drinking problem. And so he hid a fifth of whiskey. And then he went out to take a swig at minus 20 degrees. Water, of course, was froze. Whiskey was not. It crystallized his esophagus and killed him. Another person that I was very close to, because it was me, I was on a night march with a company of Marines, and the snow was so deep. I didn't have snowshoes on. I hated snowshoes. I always looked back to see who was stepping on my feet, and it was me. I hated snowshoes, so I didn't have snowshoes on. I fell into the top of a tree. Again, the snow was that deep that the tree was completely covered. Didn't see it there. I walked across the top of it and fell in. So cold is dangerous physically, but cold is even more dangerous spiritually. Is there a time in your life when you were closer to God than you are right now? Closeness to God, remember, is the secret to the Christian life. It's the only way you can live it. Only way. Jesus deals with, in Luke chapter 15, and hopefully I can do this without my reading glasses. They're over there if I need them. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to hear him. The Pharisees and the scribes murmured, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost." Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance? Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, seek diligently until she finds it, and when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin which I had lost." Just so I tell you, there is more joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to the father, "Father, give me the share of property which falls to me." And he divided his living among them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in loose living. And when he had spent everything, a great famine arose in the country, and he began to be in want. So he went and joined himself to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed swine. He would have gladly have eaten the pods that the swine ate, but no one gave him anything. For when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, but I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to the father, but while he was yet a distance, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to the servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe, put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and make merry. For this my son who is dead and is alive again. For he was lost and is found.' And they began to make merry. Now his elder son was in the field. As he came and drew near to the house, he heard the music and the dancing, and he called one of the servants and asked what all this meant. And he said to him, 'Your brother who has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has received him safe and sound.' But he was angry and refused to go in. The father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, 'Lo, these many years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command. You never gave me a kid that I might make merry with my friends. But this son of yours came who has squandered your living with harlots. You killed for him the fatted calf.' And he said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all I have is yours. It is fitting to make merry and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Lord, add his blessing to the reading of his word. This is the story of two prodigals. A lot of times we focus on the prodigal son that ran away and joined the Navy and et cetera, et cetera. But that's not who Jesus is talking to. Jesus is talking to the scribes and the Pharisees who are critical of him reaching out to lost people. So he tells them some stories they can understand. You know, if you lost a sheep, what would you do? You'd find it and be glad you found it. If you lost a coin, what would you do? You'd find it and you'd be glad you found it. What about lost people? What about these sinners and tax collectors that I'm associating with? What about them? The two sons were raised by a good father, and the father loves them both. But both of them waste that relationship. One by leaving and squandering, one by staying home and growing cold. It's the second that Jesus is talking to. The Pharisees had grown cold and hard. They objected to Jesus offering salvation to sinners who had squandered their heritage. These Pharisees did not recognize their own lostness, but passed judgment and condemnation on others with no compassion for them. Keep that in mind. That's one of the characteristics of growing cold, is judgment of others. So Jesus told them these three stories. A lost lamb, a lost coin. What about lost people? The runaway had blown it. Here he is, a Jew, feeding pigs. That's not exactly a Jewish thing to do. But he woke up, and he probably had a distinctive walk. I remember a science teacher by the name of Snell, played for the University of Michigan, and his family came to see him on a day that was something like last night. The field was just mud. You couldn't even see the numbers on the uniform. And he felt really bad about it. And his dad said, "Son, we know that Snell walk anyplace." And this is what happened to the father as he looked down the road, and he probably looked down the road often. Or if somebody came by, "Have you seen my boy? Have you seen my son?" He was looking down the road and he saw a walk that he recognized. So one comes home and another leaves. The father waits for both. A father worthy of honor, left by both of his sons at one point or another. A good relationship wasted. Now, for a while, I lived in Davison, Michigan. And the churches in Davison had a campaign called I Found It. And they would put it on the bumper sticker, "Follow me to my church, I found it." And it was a good campaign. But about 2 months after that campaign was over, somebody put a bumper sticker on the back of their car that said, "I lost it." And those are really our only two choices when it comes to our relationship with God. Either we find it or we lose it. Now, I remember as a teenager, I lost my billfold. It wasn't too bad then. The only thing in it was a driver's license. Now, it would, if I lost it, it'd be credit cards, Medicare card, et cetera, et cetera. It'd be a lot more trouble. And I bought my wife a diamond ring in Newport, which is why you said I could squeeze a dollar bill till George Washington turned blue. That's what I was saving my money for. And I bought her a single solitaire diamond. And a few years later, one of the prongs broke and we lost the diamond. I took a toothpick and went through the dust in the vacuum, hoping it would be there. It never was. I had to buy her another one. But it would have been a real joy if I'd found it, but I didn't. Now, when I went to Newport, Rhode Island, Officer Candidate School, I made it and my luggage didn't. Now, you needed to feel sorry for my roommate because I couldn't change clothes for, I think, 3 or 4 days. So I was pretty bad. But then somebody says, well, there's a suitcase down the hall that the airline just brought. And I was so thrilled, to get a change of clothes, a toothbrush, all the essentials, because there's a joy in finding. When you're alienated from a friend or a spouse, there's a joy in reconciliation. I'm looking forward to heaven. See my wife at 54 years. A real joy. Probably the worst thing that there is to lose is people lose themselves. They lose the sense of really who they are in their relationship with God. The lost self. The movie Bonnie and Clyde, which I don't recommend, but I did get a good line out of that movie. These were bank robbers. And those of you that aren't familiar with Bonnie and Clyde, they were bank robbers. And she said to him, Clyde, you said when we got together we were going someplace, and all we've been doing is going. And that's what life becomes without God. All we do is go. We're not really going anyplace. Because we need that close relationship with God to really go anyplace and become something. Sin, separation, results in frustration, guilt, lack of purpose. But there's a joy in being found. Now I'm going to ask you to identify with one of these brothers if you answered the question, there was a time when I was closer to God than I am now. What does it mean to identify? There was a psychotic young man who thought he was a dog. Somebody asked him, how long have you thought you were a dog? He said, ever since I was a puppy. That's what it means to identify. Okay. If you answered there was a time when you were closer to God, I want you to identify with one of these. Maybe you squandered your relationship with God and possibly everybody else. Your promise, your potential, your life has been wasted. It's no secret you're a sinner. You can ask any of your drinking buddies. You have thrown away perfectly good relationships. You've wasted your life. Your sin saturated, tired, and living in a pig pen. Others may think you live the high life, but you know it's a pig pen. Or maybe you've grown cold. You've lost your first love. God isn't as important to you as he once was. You've become judgmental, exclusive, hard towards those people. No compassion for others, only judgment and condemnation. Coldness is more dangerous than the pig pen. Going back to the Arctic Circle, we had to watch each other. Because when you lose your body heat, you think you're hot. You think you're hot. And often, spiritually cold think they're hot too, while they judge others. You had to watch them. If they took off their gloves, if they unzipped their jacket, coat, any signs like that, if they thought they were hot, then you knew they were in hypothermia. There were some advantages. You could eat 6,000 calories a day. The father welcomes one son home, and he coaxes the other to come. The story of two prodigal sons who wasted a perfectly good father. One wised up and came home, the other walked coldly away. Which choice is yours this morning? Without God, you are lost. With God, you are found. It's plain and simple. I found it, or I lost it. And there's no other decision in life more important than that. Either you come to the feast or walk coldly away. As a boy, the reason Jim and I got along so well is as a young child, my pet was a monkey. He was a cinnamon ringtail monkey by the name of George. He was a great pet. He'd sit on my shoulder. He was a New World monkey, so he curled his prehensile tail around my neck. And, we would go places. Life was pretty good. But then on one summer day, it was late summer, he looked at the woods and it looked pretty good. And he left. He ran away. I looked for that stupid monkey for 3 days because I knew that if I let him do his own thing, he was going to die. There's no doubt about it. And God knows if he lets you do your own thing, you're going to die. There's no doubt about it. Well, I finally found him up in a tree, and I handed him a cookie, and he jumped down from the tree, and still grabbing the cookie, he ran away from me. But he looked at me. He was running backwards, looking at me, and my dad reached down and picked him up. He collapsed. At last, he was caught. And he collapsed. Well, because he'd ran away, my dad gave him away. Anybody been in Potter's Park in Lansing? Okay, several of you have. There's the last time I was there, I had just been married, so it's a couple years ago. There was a monkey island with 2 or 3 dozen monkeys on it. And I knew that George had ended up there. So I said to Diane, my wife, I said, I wonder if he remembers me. So I yelled out, George! And one old monkey, it was surrounded by a moat of water. One old monkey waded as far as he could into that moat towards me. It was George. But our time together was gone. He couldn't get to me. I couldn't get to him. I bring that up just to let you know today is the day of salvation. There may not be a future opportunity. Without God, you're lost, and with God, you're found. I found it, I lost it. It's one or the other. This morning, you can either come closer to God, if you're not as close as you once were. That relationship is what will sustain you in the Christian life. That's it. You can't do it on your own. I'm going to invite you to come this morning. I'm not going to do an extended altar call. But if you're here and there was a time in your life when you were closer to God than you are right now, I'm going to invite you to come. You're invited to the feast. You can come to the God who loves you, or you can walk coldly away. Please don't leave lost, but come and be found by the God who loves and sustains you. Like I said, I'm not going to do an altar extended call, but I'll be here to pray with anybody who wants to come forward while the folks sing. Thank you.